the assistant headmaster for institutional giving here at the school. And it's a pleasure to be with you today, and we're thrilled to see so many of you. We were with a number of your other classmates yesterday. There were 15 on that Zoom meeting with us. So this is the second day where we're engaging with just the class of 1965. And a very special thank you to Bill Earl. Bill, thank you so much for working with our office and generating this great turnout between the 2 days. We could not have done it without you, so thank you for that. So let me just say a few things about why we're all here today. So about 12 months ago, Tom Northrup and I were talking about how to improve the Hill Fund, how to improve endowment, how to engage the senior alumni in that effort. And in thinking about that, we decided to do what's kind of best in development, and that is to try to do this kind of engagement on a more personal level, sort of one-to-one or in groups, smaller groups. And we started off in Palm Beach last January, meeting with senior alumni down in Florida. And we're intending to take the show kind of nationally and in person, and then COVID hit. So it derailed us basically most of the spring. But we decided to ramp up this effort again in the fall, and here we are. So we are taking a case of really aspiration for the Hill School across the country to our senior alumni. And our goal is to today to talk to you about how to transform the financial model that the school is currently under through increased engagement with senior alumni and also through our Hill Fund and our endowment. And today's meant to be a conversation. Tom and Preston will give some information initially, but we're hoping to get your feedback on our plan. And we want you to ask questions. We're going to ask some questions of you. And this is meant to be an open forum for you to give your advice and your thoughts. The reason we asked Tom to join our office as a volunteer and helping us is because he has extensive experience in this area professionally and as a volunteer, a donor, and an engaged alumnus with Hill. Tom led his 50th reunion fundraising committee, traveled the country during that time to solicit his classmates. And then he continued that work ongoing and did it again in his 55th reunion year with us. Tom also has 37 years of experience as a headmaster at the Hill School, ironically named, in Middleburg, Virginia, and also had experience at Chestnut Hill prior thereto as an administrator, a coach, and a teacher. So Tom specializes in schools and understanding their funding model. And we wanted to partner with him to help us in this effort. We've then asked Preston Athey, our current chairman of the board of the Hill, to join us. Preston's in his 7th and last year as chair of the board. Preston is also the largest donor to our campaign currently, and has also partnered with our office to travel the country with our gift officers to engage alumni of all generations, plus our parents. So he's perfectly situated to talk to you about kind of where the Hill's going, what's it like to lead the school at the board level, and then also to join us visiting with donors across the country. So we've partnered up with these two fantastic Hill alumni to take this case to you today. So with that said, I would like to turn it over to Preston. He's going to open up the meeting. And again, please feel free to ask questions, provide feedback, and I hope we have a good, robust conversation.
Great.
So,
thanks very much, Christian. You all should have received an agenda with some attachments, and we will be going through that later on. But before we started, I thought I would give this group a little bit of a summary on how things are going at the Hill School. This is not anything we've written down. It's really just for your information. As you can well imagine, the number one issue at the school, as it is for every school in the United States today, is COVID-19. The coronavirus certainly impacted us beginning in March when Hill was forced to basically shut down, and as all schools were. Our kids happened to be on spring break at the time, and instead of coming back to school, they stayed home. We pivoted and began online classes and continued and finished the year off remotely, and had a remote graduation, unfortunately, for the sixth formers. Obviously, no sports. But I would say we did an okay job. People really rallied, and the teachers were able to finish what they needed to finish, and the kids were able to get the education that they needed. The sixth formers got into college, and basically, while they didn't have the fun of, say, the seniors, the sixth formers didn't have the fun of sixth form spring, we were able to complete the year. And the school also did a very good job with the parents. For example, we were the first major boarding school to give a refund to parents for the costs that the school did not incur, like food in the dining hall and referees for lacrosse games and things like that. And so the parents appreciated the fact that we were forthright, gave back money that they had paid, and they were so pleased with our response. We did not wait around. We didn't argue with people the way many schools did, that about a third of those parents turned right around and donated the money back to the school, and it totaled $500,000 additional money for the Parents Fund, a staggering amount. And I haven't heard of another school that had anywhere close to that kind of response. What was even more impressive, I think, from my standpoint, was that our headmaster, right starting there in April, began to plan, how are we going to open in the fall? And through a series of task groups that he set up with senior faculty and senior administrators, they began planning every area of the school: academics, athletics, residential life, food service, etc. How are we going to provide these services to our community, our students and our faculty and our staff? Do it in a safe way so that we avoid a super spreader event, and yet recognize that it's in-person learning where these kids are really learning, and that avoid as much as possible remote learning. By starting early and by doing a whole host of things, which I won't go into in this call, the fact of the matter is the Hill did open up. We opened up early in August and started classes. Kids had come back to campus early to quarantine. They wear masks. They were socially distant. We had additional classrooms brought in through modular classrooms. We set up some tents. There was a tent outside Foster, for example. And when the weather got a little bit cold, we put some heaters in there, so that you could kind of follow all the CDC guidelines, including spacing people out in the dining hall and et cetera. And we were able to do in-person classes. We sent the students all home right before Thanksgiving. They will do 3 weeks of classes. They just started those right now here in December, finishing up. We finish up the fall semester in late October. We'll finish up the winter semester in right before Christmas. There will be a 2-month break at that point, where we will provide some courses and classes, but pretty much not really for credit, not the kind of thing that goes on your transcript. Or if the student wants, they can get internships with local companies or local nonprofits, or do special projects, etc. I heard of one young woman who is going to, her mother writes children's books, and she's going to illustrate the children's books. So great. I think that'll be a very interesting essay for her college essay, when she talks about how she spent 2 or 3 months in the winter during COVID season. Then we plan to bring all the students back the 1st of March and go straight through to the 1st of June and cut out any special 3-day weekends, things like that. The net result will be that the teachers will have the same number of classroom hours from August to June that they would have had under the old schedule, but we will basically be cleared out of campus during December, January, and February, which is the normal cold and flu season. And as you all know, it's very hard to distinguish between the regular flu or a cold and COVID until you've done a test. And yet, because COVID is so transmittable, the first time someone even has any symptoms at all, you have to quarantine them and the roommate and the person across the hall, and it gets to be pretty tough. So I think what the school has done to plan for that sort of situation and say, we're going to empty out and then bring them back when the season begins to wind down. Very, very smart. And the net result of it is, so far, we've done 4,500 tests for COVID on campus. We've only had 2 confirmed cases. And then as soon as they left, there was a 3rd confirmed case of a teacher who caught it from his young son who went to a local private school. There's been no spread at the campus. Morale among the students was good. But most of all, the letters we've received from parents as they picked up their kids to bring them home for Thanksgiving have been just off the charts positive. And so I would grade the school as an A for how it dealt with COVID, but I would grade it as an A++ on how it dealt with COVID relative to every other boarding school in America. I dare say, if you just take all the day schools and all the boarding schools, forget public schools, which get an F, but all the private schools in America, I think the Hill would show up in the top 1% for how we dealt with and then the results we had in dealing with this crisis. You all as alumni should be very proud of how this school has operated and how it's dealt with it. And again, the proof of the pudding is the students are happy and the parents are thrilled. And since they're the customers, they're the ones we really care about. So before we move on to talk about how the campus has improved and what our campaign has done, are there any questions on COVID and how we've reacted to it?
I just like that. This is Sandy. Just like to add, yesterday you mentioned there's Saturday classes coming up. How about that?
They had 5 Saturday classes. So, for, I guess the 6th formers remembered Saturday classes. No one else did. They had to get used to it, but, and they had to get used to closed weekends where they couldn't just go home anytime they wanted to. So it was a little more like old-fashioned boarding school, I think. Okay, well, let's move on. That was, of course, the #1 issue. Now, Christian's going to put up one of the slides from the materials we sent out ahead of time. And let's talk a little bit about what else has been going on in campus. Some of you are aware that we have been in a capital raising mode, a campaign of sorts now for, Christian, are we in our 7th year? I guess technically?
6th.
6th year. We got off to a reasonable start, but what we've done here is just highlight what's happened in the last 4 years, because I think it's pretty impressive. First of all, for those of you who have not been back, we have renovated the dining hall and, even more importantly, the kitchen and the pantry. And that was a $16 million project. We brought all the facilities up to modern standards, and we've air conditioned the dining hall. We've cleaned up all the beautiful N.C. Wyeth paintings, and we've expanded the dining hall into the old Saunders room, the 6th form living room. So we've done a number of things to really spruce that place up. But what's really impressive is not the dining hall, which still looks great. It's if you're getting your food, particularly at dinner, when it's more of a buffet style than a sit down, you know, the kids love it, and there's essentially almost any kind of food you would want. Very, very impressive. Looks good. The students are very happy with it, and it looks great on tours. The second thing that's happened is we've completely renovated and upgraded our STEM facilities: science, technology, engineering, and math. And we did that by taking the old science building and the old arts and crafts building, which had been built as the result of gifts from the Widener family of Philadelphia during the Depression. Facilities are 85 years old. We completely renovated them from top to bottom and connected them with a link addition in the middle. And the result is, on a $19 million project, we basically have a brand new science and math facility. It's totally state of the art. The faculty are thrilled because they had a hand in designing it, how it would be best for them. The students are perfectly happy with it. And yet, by not knocking down those buildings, we were able to keep the buildings. And if you go back, you would still see, you could walk into the old science library. The paneling is still there. You would feel very much at home. And yet you'd also say, wow, this is really upgraded. A number of other projects have occurred over the last 4 years. There have been new faculty homes that have been built east of campus. That's on, go past the soccer field. And remember where Mr. Whiteley's house was? We'll just keep going past that. We took over Green Street, blocked it off, grassed it up, and we've built, I think, 11 new faculty homes, and 3 of them were thanks to the class of '64, which was Tom Northrup, Ali Transu, and all of their classmates. So they were the ones who really took the lead on that. We've been doing renovations on the chapel, on the guest house, and even sometimes more important, we've been doing a lot of infrastructure improvements. The upper school wall, the wall behind the upper school between upper school and the gymnasium was beginning to deteriorate and fall down, and we had to fix that. The electrical grid throughout the campus has been updated. And we've been renovating existing faculty homes and apartments. So a lot of those, many of those are not glamorous. Pretty hard to get someone to give you money because there won't be a plaque on, you know, the upper school wall, and yet you have to do those things. So to make all of that happen, we have been running surpluses in our operating budget for 10 years, taking the surpluses and plowing them back into the campus. The result is that we've been making a real dent in the deferred maintenance that was a problem at the school for many, many years. We also have a number of projects we're looking ahead. We're going to do some additional work on the gym. We want to renovate the Meg's house, which we all remember as Hillside, but it's now the home of the admissions office. We want to renovate and expand the college advising office, which is in the main academic building. But the biggest one is a new dorm, a residence hall, where we would intend to put where the old infirmary was. We're knocking that down. It could not be saved. The bones weren't good enough. So we'll completely raise that building. We're trying to raise the money, bring the money in now for a new residence hall. The point of that would not be to increase the size of the school, but to give us a place to put kids from one dorm 1 year, and then we can go around and renovate dormitories. And so you have to have a swing space or a place you can put people while that happens. So looking ahead, and once we've done all of that, probably looking at 10 years worth of dormitory renovations. And once you've got all that done, then I think we'll go back and look at other things, maybe need to do some work on the library. The result of fundraising and has been that our Hill Fund, which is the annual fund, has gone from 3.2 million to over 4 million just in the last over the last 4 years. Our long-term goal certainly would be 5 or more. And we think that that's doable if we can explain to people why the school deserves their support. The endowment has continued to grow, but frankly, most of that is due to the stock market having done well, because we're not getting a lot of endowment gifts, number one, and number two, we do have to take money out of the endowment every year to help run the school. So even though it may grow, some of that growth we're taking for current expenses. And finally, something that the school, I think, was late to do, but Christian and his team have really turned on it now over the last 5 years, is to encourage alumni and others to put the Hill School into their wills and use estate gifts as a long-term source of funds. And today we have 223 people signed up. They've told us the Hill is in their will. Most of them are alumni, but interestingly, the two largest estate gifts the school's ever received came from two teachers, George Center and Tom Ruth. So that's wonderful to have received it from them. It says that our alumni need to step up too, because those teachers weren't making the kind of money that some of the alumni did. Anyway, it's been a very interesting 4 years, and frankly, longer than that. The school looks great. The buildings now are in very good shape, and wherever we find a problem, we don't let it sit. We go tackle it immediately. And the result is, if you come back to campus, or if you have been back in the last year or two for any reason, I think you'd have been impressed, and I think you would be impressed if you came back today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Thank you, Preston. I want to reiterate what Christian said in his introduction. Actually, am I on now? Okay, because I don't have the yellow box around me, and I didn't know whether. Okay,
Yep.
So I actually have been involved with the development office for 7 years, since 2013, as we ramped up our campaign for our 50th reunion. In addition, my career in education, one of my major responsibilities as head of the Hill School in Middleburg, Virginia, which is a K-8 school, 250 students roughly, was placing children in secondary schools. About a third of our children went to boarding schools. 2/3 go to, or about 2/5 go to local day schools, and the rest go to public schools. So I'm very conversant and knowledgeable about boarding school cultures. And Hill, candidly, during my career at my Hill, was really not too much on the radar screen until the last 10 to 15 years after the co-education had been proven to be a success. And we've sent some really, really fine students, athletes, artists, et cetera, to the Hill. And I've been very impressed by their reaction and their parents' reaction to the culture of the school. Having been on the campus, I would say 20 to 25 times, either working with development, I've gotten to know a lot of the teachers, a lot of the students. And I will say to you is that I'm not a board member, I'm not an employee, I'm a volunteer as a grateful alum, that I'm very, very impressed with the culture that the Hill School has. And I'd like to ask all of you a question about what I think was a very, very wise decision by the board last January when they met in Florida. And the discussion was about school size and whether the school was going to expand its size or whether it was going to be maintained around 500, slightly over 500. And the decision was remain a small to middle-sized school as opposed to trying to grow it. And part of the rationale, one of the major parts of the rationale, was that the chapel and the dining hall could continue to hold the whole school at once, so the community could come together as a whole on a regular basis and not be divided up. And I'd like to get your feedback on whether you think that was a good decision, because lots of times boards will think that by increasing enrollment, they're going to generate more revenue. I'm not persuaded that that works. I think the culture and the mission of the school will ultimately derive support if the school does the right thing and does a good job with its children. But I'd like to get this group's reaction. We asked this question yesterday to the 15 students who were on it, and Bill Earl, you're a real glutton for punishment. This is your third time through the presentation, and Roan, you and Sandy are repeaters today. But so we'll let others who have not been on calls to respond to that question. Duffy, Richard, Tony, what do you guys think? Do you think that was a good move?
Yeah, I'll wade in right away. I have always felt, reflecting on my 5 years at the Hill, that the size of the class and the size of the school and the surround of the school were pitch perfect. I never felt it was claustrophobic. I never felt that there was any need for more classmates. It just reinforces the family sense of the school. So I applaud that.
I'll follow Tony. You used the word claustrophobic. I was thinking if you tried to add more students, at some point you got some geographical constraints based on how the school is positioned. Unless you start taking over big chunks of Pottstown, which I don't think you want to do, you're not going to have the kind of large campus that some other schools have. So I think the size you have is a good one, and I like the idea that everybody can go to chapel or go to the dining room at the same time.
Yeah, I was on the board at Lancaster Country Day School for a number of years, and we went through this same exercise, whether to increase the size of the student body. And it's not just a matter of adding bodies. Just the ramifications get complex. And I think you lose more than you gain.
Duffy, where was that? What school was that?
Lancaster Country Day School in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Okay, sure, I know. Now, we had the same thing at Hill. My Hill, we ultimately capped at 240, 250. That was it. We were going to get bigger. We could have gotten bigger. We could have had 350 students.
Yeah.
We could have built where we had plenty of land, but it really would have compromised our culture. And I know in working with children over 50 years how important the sense of community is. I think it's one of Hill School. I think, Tony, you mentioned the word family, that family feel, even though it didn't always feel like a warm and cuddly family when we were there, there was a sense of that you had support behind you and that you were part of something greater than yourself. I remember my first day on campus, new boy, West Virginia, fifth former, homesick, walked across the campus, and Ned Hall said to me, and I'd never met him, he said, "Hello, Tom, how you doing?" I said, "The headmaster knows my name? Are you kidding?" And that I realized later that he memorized from their applications our pictures over the summer, and by the first day, he knew everybody. And I think that family feel just can't be replaced. Preston mentioned the difference between in-person schooling and virtual schooling. I will maintain that over half of learning in schools is social in nature as opposed to academic. We got great academic training at Hill, writing compositions every week, great math instruction, great science instruction, but half of the learning took place outside the classroom, just being with class.
Okay.
I have a question for Duff. Both my kids in the late 80s, early 90s went to Lancaster Country Day. And my daughter had her 20th down there, and I visited the campus. I didn't even recognize it. Did they have a culture shift? And did the head count go up, Duff? From the like 95?
No, they've gotten some wonderful gifts. The Gardner family has just built a theater that will be a community. The Lancaster Symphony will play there. So they have not increased the size of their student body, but they've built a lot more facilities.
Yeah, their squash courts look just like our new ones.
Yes, they are.
They're
They put
phenomenal
Franklin
teams.
Marshall College to shame.
Thank you. I just wondered if they did go up in headcount.
No.
I have one comment on the size of the school.
Go ahead, Clay.
I remember a couple years ago.
I'm in here because we knew that Tom could have some internet issues, so we'll keep moving, and he'll come back in when he's able. Go ahead.
Okay. Can I make my question
Yes.
now?
Yes.
Okay. I remember a couple of years ago, I had a nice chat with the headmaster, Zach, at the National Preps of all places. And he was very proud of the fact that they had a new crew team. And I mentioned to him how, at least as it relates to wrestling, it was difficult getting enough heads, enough people involved in the sport. Because, well, with respect to wrestling, it's principally boys. So the number of boys is less than it was when we were in school. And the requirement for athletic participation is not what it was when we were in school. I think each student needs to be involved in an active sport, maybe only one of 3 semesters. Now, correct me if I'm wrong with that. So I told Zach I thought that was probably a bad decision, that they had too many sports, and were resulting in diluting the needed number on each of the teams, not just wrestling, and that they should consider this when they review the size of the school. Now, I'm not a proponent of increasing the size. I think everyone's comment is pretty much the same as mine, that it is a family school, and getting to be like a Lawrenceville is really not a very good game plan. I would agree with that. But still, because the size of the school is being limited, I think in the big picture, we have to look at the number of offerings we have so that there's enough students to fill things like the various teams that we have, and to maintain competitiveness with our opponents.
Right. Well, I think that's a very good point. And the fact of the matter is there aren't as many kids going out for some sports as there used to be. And they have over 40, I think 45 students who are both boys and girls who are going out for crew. I will say, relative to wrestling, as you probably know, Clay, we got a new wrestling coach a year and a half ago. He was the last Hill wrestler to win at Lehigh in the interscholastic tournament. He wrestled competitively in college and spent then and I think he was Hill class of 2000, so he spent then 12 to 14 years as an associate or assistant coach at 3 different college programs. And then when we made a decision to try to get a new coach, he put his hat in the ring. And when I asked why would he come back to the Hill rather than, continue in D1 wrestling, the comment was, he was married, had 2 kids, and frankly wanted off that train because the Hill was such an attractive place to raise a family. He has already made a huge impact on the wrestling program. The year before he came, I understand that there were more than one match where we had to forfeit some of the weight classes because we literally had nobody to wrestle. Last year, before COVID, that was not a problem. And if it wasn't last year, it might have even been the year before, we placed, had three kids get through to like the quarterfinals at Lehigh. He also runs a wrestling clinic for youngsters in Pottstown, particularly the 10 to 14-year-olds. So he's bringing up, and parents are signing up and bringing their kids there on Saturdays, etc. So he's already starting a minor leagues for potential wrestlers to come to the Hill, and it's already having an impact on admissions. So in general, I agree with you. We have a lot of offerings. We have to be careful not to delude ourselves, but specifically in wrestling, that's coming back.
Well, Preston, you make some great points, and my purpose was not to blow the horn for wrestling, which of course the alumni parents are very happy about. I am also, and get up there, and it's great to see the headmaster show up at a wrestling tournament like the national preps. It's never happened before, Zach, as you probably are aware. But you make a point that is clearly applicable to all the athletic programs, and that is the quality of the coach means a lot. Okay, if you have a crappy coach, you're going to have a crappy program, and wrestling is a good example of that. There may be other athletic programs at Hill that would be similar, but the Hill had suffered through a couple of decades at least of mediocre at best leadership at the faculty level for their coaching. Hate to say it, and they haven't won the state tournament since my son Ryan was a student, and he was a class of '95. So, but since Huffman came, he's proven how the coach can have an influence on the quality of a program, and the ability to place alumni, the young alumni, in competitive situations when they go to college. Okay, and we all know that if you're good if you have a hook like a sport or playing the tuba or whatever, and you're really good at it, it's going to improve your chances into getting into a better school or maybe even getting a scholarship. So I think we're all in the same, we all understand that. But to get back to my initial point, I do continue to have concern over the number of offerings. I know it helps attract students, but I don't think Hill has a problem attracting good students anymore. So to have so many athletic offerings, I think will have a negative impact on some of the athletic programs, particularly those that are not as competitive as, say, wrestling is now, or some of the other sports. And I can't be more than specific to that. So all I say is I hope that the board continues to monitor this and certainly not add sports anymore. And if anything, consolidate a little bit to improve the quality in such a way that those who do graduate can use their athletic experience at the Hill School beyond the Hill School.
Right. Well, good point. I think it's like a lot of other things, they don't teach German anymore, and they do teach Mandarin. So there will be changes over time, and it wouldn't surprise me if a couple of sports dropped off. I will say for crew, to your point about kids going to college, we have one, the captain of the crew team this year has just signed a letter of intent to go to Cornell next year for crew. We have one kid going to Yale on lacrosse. We have 2 girls going to Duke on field hockey. So, we're still able to get some pretty darn good student athletes and place them in quality colleges, which is great.
The last comment on my part, crew is an excellent, I may be inconsistent here, but of all sports, it's a great sport because it's co-ed. It includes both men and women, and wrestling is pretty much all male. However, high school wrestling is the fastest growing sport for girls right now and has been for quite a few years.
Yeah.
So I continue to encourage our coaching staff to attract girls who might want to wrestle at the Hill School, because they would have an excellent opportunity there with the quality coaching that Hill affords the wrestling program.
Great. Is Tom back on the line? If not, why don't I continue on here and just talk a little bit about what we've been telling other people on these calls. And let's start from the beginning. Well-resourced boarding schools, well-resourced schools of all kinds, obviously not only have to balance their budget, but they can't try to balance it all on the backs of the parents because tuition is unlikely to be able to carry the full load given all the other demands on a school. So we've, if Christian can scroll down, Tom did a little bit of a thought exercise, and he looked at some background information, and we had an operating budget between fiscal 17 and fiscal 20 that grew from 28 to 32 million. The Hill Fund grew over that time. The endowment grew over that time. The tuition went up, financial aid went up, the student body was basically the same. And as we look at this, we are getting, now you scroll back up if you would please.
Am I back on, Christian?
You are back on, Tom. So
Yes.
you want to?
Okay, well, I can move in here. Yeah, Preston's first talk was primarily about capital improvements to the school, and my thrust here is on operations and how do you actually operate it. And he made the point by running surpluses, you're able to do the proper amount of deferred maintenance. And I will confirm his or agree totally with the way the campus looks. It's very well maintained, and they're clearly addressing issues that if they're not addressed, you really have major expenses. So basically, we said, okay, a budget roughly 30 million, tuition 60,500 students in the student body. And the sources, the way the Hill funds this budget is 60% tuition, which means it's funded by 40% non-tuition. And so what are the sources of non-tuition revenue? Well, in every case, whether it's Lancaster Country Day or the Hill School, Middleburg or the Hill School, Pottstown, an annual fund is typically one of them. Sometimes schools have special events like auction, and some schools which are fortunate to have endowments. And those, the annual gifts and the endowment basically generate the non-tuition revenue. And what I will put forward is that the well-funded schools, the schools that are funded in a fail-safe manner are more like 50-50 tuition, non-tuition. And for Hill to get in this hypothetical budget of 15 million or 30 million, you'd need 15 million of non-tuition to reach that goal. And that could be done in a number of ways. This is one of them. The Hill Fund goes to 6 million and the endowment goes up another million on the draw. It could be done 7 million Hill Fund, 8 million endowment. It could be various, but the two of those are the only two sources that you have to do it. Let's go to the next slide, Christian. Can we go to the next slide?
Yeah, you're there.
Okay, yeah, if you could spin that up to the top, that'd be good. Okay, so let's take a hypothetical budget looking out to fiscal year 26, which would be 175th anniversary, and assume an operating budget of 40 million. This year it's about 33 million, so this is not too far off. And let's assume a balance of 50-50 tuition, non-tuition. That would mean you'd need $20 million of non-tuition revenue. And one possible combination could be 6 million Hill Fund, 14 million endowment. Endowment would need to grow from 170 million to 300 million to make that realistic. It could be the Hill Fund 12 million and the endowment continues to be 8 million draw. It could be 10 and 10. There are lots of different ways to get to the mix, but the mix, I think, has to be thought very carefully about. I think senior alumni have to understand it, and I think senior alumni are going to ultimately be the leaders in getting the school funded where you can continue to guarantee surpluses from operations and develop rainy day funds. So some background. Let's look at some other schools. If you could spin it down a little bit, Christian. We looked at 15 outstanding boarding schools. And if you look at the bottom piece there, the 15 schools we looked at were Blair, Choate, Deerfield, Episcopal High School, Groton Hill, Lawrenceville, Mercersburg, Petty, Andover, Exeter, St. Andrews, St. Paul's, Taft, and Woodbury Forest. And what we looked at was what I think the important statistic on endowments is. Raw amount is important, but also what is the per student endowment that you have. Now, 4 of these schools have endowments of at least $1 million per student. Now, that's going to generate considerable non-tuition revenue every year, year in, year out. At a 4% draw, it would be $40,000 a student. On a $65,000 tuition, that's a pretty healthy amount. Hill at 130 million is roughly $325,000 a student. At 4%, that's $13,000 a student. Lawrenceville ranks 10th. They're at $600,000 per student. So most of these schools are between $600,000 a student and $1 million a student. And I think there's endowment money on a short-term basis is very hard to raise. On a long-term basis, it's more feasible. And I think the way that Hill in 10 years will have an endowment of 500 million, and I predict it will, which would be $1 million for 500 students per student, million per student, will be through estate giving. There's no question about it. The transfer of wealth in this country over the next 10 years is going to be very, very significant. The question is whether Hill will be included as a priority for those estate gifts. The other way to do it in the short term, and this is the balance that I think has to be thought about and senior alumni have to be educated on, is it may be easier. My experience in fundraising has been as easier to ask someone to give $10,000 a year rather than $250,000 for annual giving than it is to ask them for $250,000 for the endowment. Now, there may be some people where it's easier to do an endowment money. They've got appreciated stock or they've sold a business. That may be an easier ask, but for most people, it is the annual gift is the easier way to go and has a tremendous significance. A $50,000 donation up to the annual fund is like endowing the school $1 million. And if it's done every year, it's a very significant. A $2,000 gift, an 1851 society gift, is like a $50,000 endowment. So it's understanding that the non-tuition mix, endowment, Hill Fund, there's no smoke and mirrors in funding a city like the Hill has. I mean, Hill has a city. It's got houses, it's got buildings, it's got people, it's got no tax base, it's got tuition, fee for service, and then it's got this non-tuition. And understanding that when we started our campaign for the 2000 class of 64 project and for 2013, 2014, we were talking to our classmates. I'd say the majority really did not understand the importance of the non-tuition to balance out the tuition, the fee-paying parents who are, in many cases, least prepared to support the school. The concept of senior alumni, 50 years and out or more, is that I've talked to Christian about over these years, is that all of us know where we are in life. By 68, 70, 75 years old, we pretty much know our family situation. We know our children, grandchildren's needs. We know what we do for our community. And the question I think all of us have to ask, and what we ask our classmates when Ollie Transu and Tom Pittman and I traveled around in 2013, 2014 was, did the Hill make a difference in your life? Do you feel you did better professionally, personally, as a citizen because of your experience? And the next page, let's transfer over to the next page. That Paul Chancellor wrote a history at the 125th anniversary of the school, 1976. I mean, we're just getting out of school then. And he dedicates this history to us, the old boys. And this is what he said about, now we weren't included in his description here because we were just getting started, but he said, who woven for over a century woven something valuable and enduring into the fabric of American life, who've risen to leadership and prominence in innumerable fields of life, who've given most generously of their time, wisdom, and wealth to preserve their inheritance and to carry the school's high honor higher still. And I just want to commend Preston. I will say that part of why I've been so engaged over the last 7 years has been Preston's example as a leader. I mean, he has really put his shoulder to the wheel. He's walked the walk. He talks the talk very effectively, but he walks the walk. And he's contributed what great board members contribute, wealth, wisdom, and work. And he's done all of them. And I'm very impressed, as I said, with the current culture of the school, and with the leadership of the school, and with the faculty of the school, and with the coaches of the school. I mean, I played basketball, Clay. I know you were a great wrestler, and I can tell you the quality of coaching in basketball is fantastic. Seth Eilberg, the coach, has a phenomenal program.
Yeah,
Now,
Tom, I know what basketball is.
What's that?
I said, yes, Tom, I do know what basketball is.
Okay, Clay. All right. But from the epilogue from the introduction, Paul Chancellor says 9 years after John Meggs' death in 1911, those who were then old boys arranged for the transfer of the school to alumni ownership. Since the 1920s, 1,000 hands have labored long to preserve and strengthen the legacy entrusted to them. Okay? So it's 100 years we're celebrating. We wanted to have a 100th anniversary celebration this fall, and obviously that got knocked out with the COVID. Hope to do that next year. But from the epilogue, and this is what really inspires me and inspired me, and why I got so involved 7 years ago, and why a number of my classmates who had not been big donors at all and not really understood what Hill needed really stepped forward. Hill has no special authority, but it's a proud institution. And I think, for 20 of the classmates of 65 to show up on a Zoom call indicates that there's pride that you have for your school. The old boys are its gifts to the world. Now it's become their dependent. Now, Chancellor said this in 1975. It's become their dependent. It asks two things: pride in the past and faith in the future. Now, the major question I got when I traveled around and met with my classmates was not pride in the past. Everybody had that. Everybody loved their experience, even though we didn't like it at the time. As Preston has said so eloquently, he didn't particularly like it when he was there. He liked what it did for him. And I think all of us in 64 that I met with feel the same way. The question is faith in the future. Is the school being well run? Is it being well managed? Is it being well led? Does it have a faculty who understands the mission? And my answer to all those questions is yes, 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 and yes. Therefore, I think that over the next 5 years, fiscal year 22 through fiscal year 26, which is 5 years, 5 fiscal years, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. The Hill senior alums must step up and do two things. One, commit to an annual gift at a priority level. And two, put the school in their estate. And I think there are many of us, I've already done that, and I will continue to do that. I think there are many of us who will do that if they understand what they're going to be doing is going to make a difference. And it is going to make a huge difference. And as an educator, the only thing that ever mattered to me about my students, my alumni, and I'm very proud of them, was that they were good people for the world. They're well educated. They could read, write, think, etc. But were they good people? And I think Hill has not lost sight of the importance of citizenship and character. And that's why I'm all in for it. And I hope that my experience with the class of '64 is that we got a lot of our guys who are all in for it. I think that the years we were there, we were so lucky. We were so fortunate to have Ned Hall, to have Dave Mercer. You know, you get down the list, Mr. Jusson, Mr. Whiteley, et cetera. We were very, very lucky. And the bones of the school are the same. When you go on the campus today, it looks good, but it's very recognizable. It's not like a different place. The kids are terrific. The faculty and staff are excellent and committed. And I think that we are uniquely positioned in time, in perspective, in capacity to lead. And I think it's important that we do that. So I like your reaction to what I've just said.
I'd like to say something both just personally to Preston and Tom. My experience is as a very general idealistic alumnus out there in the world, trying to do my thing, but I also was chairman of a nonprofit educational foundation in New York City for 5 years and a trustee for 20 years called the British American Educational Foundation. So I can appreciate the constraints and opportunities that you guys are working under. And from the sound of what you said today, I'm really happy with your dedication for sure, but also your approach seems pitch perfect. And keep it up, and thank you.
Thank you.
I actually can't resist thank you because I'm direct descendant of Matthew and John Meggs, so I'm thanking you on behalf of the founders of the school.
Well, have you read the history recently?
No, I have not.
Well, they were visionary. They were visionary in what they understood and what they did. I mean, they were awesome. And well, this is another point I want to make about Preston's leadership. So I said, Preston, we've got to do a history from 1976 to 2026 and interview these guys who went through the school and during those years, the decisions that were made. And within 1 minute, Preston says, you're right, and I will fund it. Okay?
Fabulous.
So there will be a next 50 year that will begin working. I'm sure, I think they're looking for a writer right now and researcher, but I think it's really important to have alumni stories, and Chancellor's history is wonderful. And the Meggs family, I mean, my goodness, Matthew and John, just awesome what they did. Now, Dwight had a little tougher time and you know, ultimately sold it to the alumni, but we are, I mean, I am inspired by what Chancellor said about us. And I mean, he wasn't saying about us. He was saying about what the Hill had done for the old boys that he knew and what they've done. And the COVID crisis, I mean, you know, you read about what they faced with fires and plagues. And I mean, they had kids die on campus.
Right.
I also wonder, just as a quick aside, whether there's the 100th anniversary of the school being a nonprofit enterprise is a big enough hook to hang anything on. But that's ending this year, and I just wonder whether you guys had used that at all.
Well, we were going to use it, but really it's more, to me, the 100th is a definite hook. And you've obviously been in fundraising yourself and been around the block. But more importantly, do the old boys see themselves as the senior members of the family now? And we got to take care of our family.
Right. Good.
Right? I mean, that's the deal. And we either are, and I would not, I mean, I can tell you this right now, Tony, I would not be spending the time that I've spent if I didn't believe in what they're doing. I mean, I know the people there, and I know how hard they work, and I know how much they care. And the school deserves to be funded, and it deserves to go on to help develop. And I know virtually everybody in my class that we met with 35 guys out of about 100, face to face, just like this. Only this isn't quite face to face, is it? And they're good people. I mean, to a person, they were doing things in their communities. They, were good citizens, and that they were obviously well educated. But being smart and doing the right thing for the world are two different things.
Duff, you had your hand up earlier. Did you have a comment you wanted to make?
I'm sorry?
Duff had his hand up earlier.
I'm sorry.
Oh, just to point out that really, aren't we all trustees?
Yes. Thank you, Duffy. Exactly right. It's exactly right. Do the old boys see themselves as trustees? What's the response to that? That's a great way of putting it. You've issued a challenge there, Duff.
Just the point is to explain to classmates, both now and in the future, that the school runs on trusteeship, and we are the trustees.
And if you didn't have faith in the future, you may not want to be a trustee. That's, to me, that was what I've learned in the last 7 years. This school is doing, as Preston described how they responded to the COVID, but before that, I mean, that's impressive to me. It's not surprising to me because I see the way that how much they care and how hard they work, and they're smart.
I know we're getting towards the end. I have one more passing comment that I just want to throw out there, but I miss Philippians. I was really sad at the new logo because it took out "whatsoever things are true." And I don't know whether you all have had any reaction to that new logo, but for me, it's like trying to sell cereal rather than education. And to throw out a logo that's been around for 160 years strikes me as being short-sighted.
I didn't know that, Tony. Whatsoever things are true, to me, that's the heart and soul of the Hill School.
Yeah, and the fact that it just says Hill rather than the Hill or the Hill School just is way too simplistic and a message, and it's too much of marketing a product rather than understanding the whole opportunity of education that the place provides. And it just makes me sad to see the phrase disappear from the logo.
That's a fair comment, and you were not alone in that feeling. Let's just say that it was one of those decisions when it came down to thinking about logos and how to do the marketing of the school, that it kind of came down to a little simpler, cleaner logo for public consumption. I will say that the sixth form patch on the Blazers still is the old logo with the motto and the sword and everything else. We're not about to go and destroy any of the old logos that are around the campus. And whatsoever things are true as a motto is still absolutely front and center in almost everything we do at the school.
Okay, so it is front and center in everything else that you put out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
well, that makes me feel better. I wasn't aware that it had gone off in one of the spots.
Tony's comment is absolutely fair. And Linda's on. I don't know, Linda, if you want to say anything, because you were sort of front and center in helping to shepherd what's going on.
Sure. Yeah, happy to chime in. So the primary hill mark that you see with just the hill is really meant as sort of something that we put on social and as a quick glance. But we have the full academic seal, which still has whatsoever things on it. We just don't put it on everything because it is sort of a cherished phrase, and we put it on diplomas, important documents, transcripts, etc. Before whatsoever things, it was on hand sanitizer, it was on trash cans, it was sort of just displayed on everything that sort of took away from the value and the meaning of it.
Okay. You feel better, Tony? I do.
Well, next time you write me, make sure the old logo's on the letter.
We will do that for sure. I actually made a note of that.
Thank you very much.
Let me, guys, and we're going to sign off in a few minutes unless you want to stay on for longer. I'm happy to stay. But I'd like, you know, if you would reach out to Christian and his team. What I'd like to do is form a senior alumni council that when we can travel, we can have these Zoom meetings as long as we need to have them. But once we can get out and, you know, we can have a council that really does go national and explains to people, explains to classmates and other senior alums what the school is doing, why they should have faith in the future, and work on this. It's a combination of Hill Fund, the development team at the Hill School, the people who work there day to day, who are employed, should not have to be like the Salvation Army and shake the tin cup every year for annual giving for senior alums. Just shouldn't. I mean, that should be a given. I loved the comment that aren't we all trustees? And so as being trustees to senior alums who care and understand and who've lived a life, that's just what we do. If it's a priority, and it won't be for everybody, then that's a given. We understand that. But for a huge percentage of us, it will be a priority. And us making it a priority will speak volumes to parents and children who are looking at the school now, who graduate from the school, by the example we set.
Right.
And
well, we have, as you point out, not a lot of time. I want to make sure that anyone else who has a question can do it. Dave Bailey, do you have anything you'd like to ask? You're on mute.
Thank you very much, Preston. I've
There you go.
listening with interest, and the others have spoken for me, I think.
Great. Bert Kozloff? Okay.
Bert, wait a second. Bert has nothing to say? That's not acceptable.
Well, it's rare, that's sure.
It's certainly rare. Bert, how you doing, pal?
You're on mute, Bert.
Mute. He's
Can't
on
hear
mute.
you.
You got to unmute yourself.
I can't hear you, Bert.
I think he doesn't know how. It's down in the lower left.
No, it's just a very old computer.
All right.
Well, there you go. Good to hear your voice.
Thank you.
Richard
Bert,
Tito.
Bert, I think it's more that it's an old operator of the computer.
That's what I said.
And
Richard,
I'd also like to take this chance to make sure that Dave Bailey is working hard on the Democratic candidates in Georgia.
Well, certainly they've got my vote and my contributions, but I wouldn't hold out much hope. The Trump signs are still up all over Georgia.
All right.
Being a good Virginian, I've already gone down to Georgia and voted for the Republicans. So there you go.
Oh, no.
Anyone else?
According to our Secretary of State, Clay, you're not alone.
So I hear.
I've got one thing before we go. I don't know if this will show well. There's Tom Northrup as captain of the cross-country team.
Yeah.
1964.
Well, that's a few years ago.
Yeah, and a
I'm
little known fact is on the far left in the second row at the top, that's Oliver Stone.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Oliver Stone was the tennis partner of Lenny Simpson when Lenny was in 8th grade, and Oliver was, and he was Bill Stone when he was at Hill.
Right.
And Lenny Simpson, a few years ago when he was on campus, very seriously said, "Whatever happened to my doubles partner, Bill Stone?" And he hadn't realized that Bill Stone was AKA Oliver Stone. So, yes,
Well, Tom, I would just say you were a great captain of the cross country team back then, and you're still a great captain now. So I appreciate what you did right here.
Very
Nice.
sweet, Dick.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I remember you well. You've lost a little hair since the last time I saw you, though.
Yeah, it's all that running; it just blows away.
No, I agree that. But I'm serious about the if you like to get involved with this project, which I think is a very worthy thing to do at this point in our lives. I invite you to reach out to Christian and say, and Bill Earl, this is the third time you've been through this presentation. Is there any coherence to it, or is it just ramble?
It's yesterday I had to leave early because I had a telehealth thing going on. And I
Okay.
didn't get to this latter part of it, but boy, this is terrific. This is really
Well, you've been a real star. I mean, I think that what Ollie and I found when we went and had lunch and dinner and spent time with people is that there's so many of us have such unbelievably deep and good feelings about the school. And you know, if I were doing when I do business, I like to do people who've been raised by places like the Hill School. You can shake a hand and you got a deal, and they're going to keep their word. And that's what I always tried to promote my graduates, the way I'd like them to be. And I think that's certainly the way I feel about you guys. I'm sure if we were doing a business deal, I could sit down with you and we could work it out, and we wouldn't need a 55-page contract to agree we were going to do what we said we were going to do. So everybody has limits on their time and resources, and this is obviously a priority for me for a variety of reasons, but I invite anyone to join the team and get on board.
Well, Christian,
It's the responsibility of our class president to make a concluding comment. He's been very quiet, but
I've got to run, folks. Thank you.
re-elected him years ago in order to do that.
Here you go. There was one point that Preston made yesterday that I thought was nice and spoke well about the focus and flavor of the school. When the school decided to very quickly give back funds that were not used last spring.
Right.
And I don't know of any other school. Colleges in my area didn't. Some ended up being sued over it. But Preston mentioned yesterday, didn't today, but that cost the school. I mean, there was ultimately it was a $2.5 million cost for the school, in a combination of having given up some of the funds that would have come in tuition and some of the costs associated with managing the COVID in the springtime. That was a $2.5 million bite out of the school this past spring that they took at the very time they were saying, here's your money back for not having had people eating the dining room and whatever else, as you mentioned.
well, Roland,
That's a high watermark. Not many people did that in tough times when COVID was starting to nip at our heels, and it spoke well for the Hill.
if you allow me, I'll just, it's very slightly different than that. We gave back $1.5 million last year in refunds, but that was the savings that we had. So we gave back all the savings, and then the parents gave 1/3 of that back to us. The 2.5 million is the current fiscal year that we're in, which is $1.5 million of additional expenses to deal with COVID and $1 million in reduced tuition because there's some students that couldn't make it back to campus. So we only charge them the day student rate if they're not actually living on campus. But so the 2.5, you're absolutely right about that. But we've made the decision as a board that this is a rainy day and we have rainy day funds set aside. And if you can't use them at a time like this to continue to keep your teachers fully employed and not reduce the quality of the education, this, when are you going to use it? So this is the year. We're praying that Pfizer and Moderna and everyone else are successful so that it'll only be basically this one major year, and the next fiscal year we'll be back on track.
Well, thank you. Well done. And one other comment, I learned a little from hearing my classmates actually talk about changes. I hadn't been to the Hill in a while, but I would encourage having all students participate perhaps a little more actively in athletics. I look at the folks I see on the Zoom presentations, and when I've gotten together for alumni gatherings, we're a pretty trim group of guys who have kept ourselves in relatively good shape. And I think the fact that during our years of growth and maturity at the Hill, having those required sports each semester was often painful, but it was a very important step in growing up, and it's served us well, I think, over the last 50 years. I would put that on the table again as another marker to think about going forward.
Excellent.
But I am very impressed, and I like very much the visual presentations that have come from the Hill, give us a feel for what has gone on in the campus and the dining room and the changes that were done and the improvements in the STEM program in the building. For many of us who can't get there often, it is a powerful way to stay connected and feel that the school is in good hands and is moving along well. And you have an attractive group of students who, when they speak in your publications and in your videos, they're wonderful examples of what the Hill produces. And it's impressive, and I always appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you all for what you do.
Christian?
All right. Well, we really appreciate you being with us today. Roan, Tony, Richard, Duff, Bill, Clay, Bert, and Sandy, thank you for joining us today. As Tom encouraged you, if you want to get involved and help us on this pathway, please be in touch with myself, or a couple of gift officers are on this call or you've met with, you can be in touch with them. We'd love to have you join us in this effort. One thing I asked everybody to do yesterday was, if you didn't see someone on this call today who's in your class, reach out to them and let them know what you heard today and that we're on the move. We're ambitious for the school, and we'd love for them to tune in at a future senior alumni Zoom. I mentioned in the introduction, we're going to be doing this with a number of other classes who are in reunion years and so forth, and taking the case out nationwide and across all generations of our senior alumni. So this is not the last time we'll be talking to your generation, but we greatly appreciate you being with us. And we hope that you'll stay engaged, and we'll see you again another time soon, we hope. Sandy, you have something?
Was either yesterday or today recorded? And as
Yes.
such, if someone couldn't make the call, Bill could let the other classmates know that they can log on to something and watch one of the presentations?
Yes, we've recorded both of them. So if you are in touch with classmates who weren't able to attend, or Bill, you and I can catch up offline, and we could circulate a link to the rest of those who didn't RSVP or weren't able to make it.
Yeah, send me the link and I'll be glad to circulate it.
Okay, thank you. Clay, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
All right. We have a Google group for all of our classmates, so it has facilitated and really broadened our ability to communicate amongst ourselves. It's really a wonderful thing that Bill started.
No, I didn't
And-
start it. You did.
Well, you started the whole idea of having an email
All right.
sent out to everybody, but we have over 100 people on this group,
Great.
and we consolidated it into a single Google group email address, as you probably would understand about. So it's easy for us as a class to disseminate this kind of information or a link that
Okay.
we might be able to have.
It
All right.
reaches all classmates except for Tony Bayless.
Oh, nice.
Well, you're the one who keeps blocking it. Clay and I have been back and forth over this, and Tony doesn't want to participate. So what's that all about?
That's a terrible way to end this, Bill.
All right.
I can't
All right.
figure out the technology. Let's just leave it at that.
All right.
I will say, the Google group, I very much enjoyed it. It shows we're all aging with grace and humor.
All right. Thank you, everybody, very much. It was, again, great to see you, and we appreciate you being with us today. Have a good rest.
Thank you, Preston.
Well done.